Lyra Moore was mocked the moment she stepped onto the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire stage, called a street corner nobody, jeered by the host, laughed off as a Greyhound station stray who dared to compete. They sneered at her torn jeans, filmed her trembling hands, bet she'd choke on the first question. Nobody knew. The quiet woman with an ink-stained sketchbook possessed a superhuman eidetic memory. Until she answered every question, flawlessly silenced the studio and revealed a mind that humbled a nation. The Las Vegas studio for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, U.S. edition, was a glittering coliseum of ambition, its blinding lights casting a merciless glow on the stage where dreams were made or shattered. The air buzzed with the hum of anticipation, thick with the scent of designer perfumes, and the smug chatter of an audience that wore their egos like tailored suits, their diamond watches and couture dresses a testament to their self-anointed superiority. Lyra Moore, a 24-year-old from nowhere, stepped onto this battleground, a quiet figure in torn jeans, a faded hoodie, and battered canvas sneakers, her tangled hair framing a face devoid of makeup. She clutched an ink-stained sketchbook to her chest, her sole companion in a theater that mocked her presence from the moment she appeared. The sprawling stage, flanked by digital screens and a gleaming hot seat, was a proving ground for the elite, where intellect was measured in quick wit and polished charisma. The host, Damien Holt, known for his razor-sharp sarcasm, held court with a grin that dripped disdain, his tailored blazer a stark contrast to Lyra's unadorned attire. The guest judges, industry titans with Ivy League pedigrees, lounged in their booths, their eyes raking over Lyra like vultures spotting carrion. The audience, a mix of corporate moguls, influencers, and reality TV fans, sized her up with sneers, their smartphones raised to capture her inevitable failure. Lyra's gaze, calm and unyielding despite the laughter, scanned the studio with the precision of a chess master, but her unassuming demeanor made her invisible to the elite who ruled the game. To them she was a joke, a prop in their scripted spectacle, and they were determined to crush her before the first question was asked. As Lyra settled into the hot seat, her ink-stained fingers nervously tracing the edges of her sketchbook, a group of tech entrepreneurs in the VIP section, their smartwatches and tailored blazers exuding Silicon Valley arrogance, erupted in mocking laughter, their jeers a venomous shroud that silenced the studio's ambient buzz. A lean entrepreneur with a platinum cufflink stepped forward, his voice a sneering bellow that reverberated across the theater. "What's this, a street scribbler thinking she can outsmart our quiz?" he scoffed, waving his blockchain-branded pen like a scepter. "That hoodie's so tattered, it's practically screaming soup kitchen sauce. And those sneakers, they're an insult to this stage's grandeur. This is Millionaire, where we crown intellects, not where you come to doodle your way through trivia. You're tarnishing our show just by sitting there looking like you've wandered in from a bus stop. Why don't you skulk back to your alley before you waste our time with your scribbled guesses?" The entrepreneurs roared, some tossing digital tokens at the stage, their taunts a relentless barrage that echoed through the auditorium. A reality TV mogul in a gold chain smirked his nod, fueling their cruelty as the camera zoomed in on Lyra's chipped nails, framing them as proof of her inadequacy. Lyra adjusted her sketchbook, her posture rigid, her face a mask of stone, her silence a shield against their venom. But the weight of their scorn pressed like a physical force, the audience's rage surging at the orchestrated public shaming that targeted her preparation and socioeconomic status. The humiliation began the instant Lyra took her seat, as Damien Holt raised an eyebrow, his voice a venomous drawl that cut through the studio's buzz. "Well, today we have Lyra from which street corner exactly?" he sneered, his grin dripping with mockery that ignited the crowd's laughter. "You look more like you came from a Greyhound station than a library sweetheart. That hoodie's so faded it's practically screaming homeless. And those sneakers, they're an insult to this stage. This is Millionaire, where we crown geniuses, not where you come to play trivia with your sketchbook. Honestly, it's almost tragic you thought you could sit in that chair. Why don't you spare us the embarrassment and catch the next bus back to nowhere?" The audience roared their jeers, a storm that humiliated Lyra in front of millions. One voice shouting, "First question, bet she'll choke." Next, Damien pressed on his smirk a guillotine. "Let's see if you can survive the $100 question without tripping over your own feet." Before the first question was revealed, as Lyra sat poised under the studio lights, a clique of quiz show veterans in the front rows, their monogrammed jackets and polished loafers exuding competitive pedigree, began heckling her their laughter, a barbed wire fence that drew every eye in the theater. A grizzled veteran with a silver lapel pin leaned forward, his voice a mocking bellow that carried over the crowd's snickers. "Look at this. Nobody thinking she can match our trivia prowess," he sneered, waving his commemorative quiz trophy like a weapon. "Those jeans are so ripped, they're practically screaming vagrant. And that sketchbook. It's an insult to this game's legacy. This is Millionaire, where we battle for brilliance, not where you come to fumble with your street smarts. You're ruining our show just by sitting in that chair looking like you've wandered in from a dive bar. Why don't you bolt back to nowhere before you tank our night with your clueless answers?" The veterans roared, some tossing paper scorecards at the stage, their taunts a relentless barrage that echoed through the auditorium. A game show host in a velvet bow tie smirked his nod, fueling their cruelty as the cameras panned to Lyra's tangled hair, framing it as evidence of her failure. Lyra sat poised, her face impassive, her silence a fortress against their venom, the audience's fury erupting at the coordinated public assault that targeted her readiness and worth. For the first question, a $100 softball, Damien leaned forward, his voice laced with condescension. Who was the first president of the United States? A. George Washington, B. Abraham Lincoln, C. John Adams, D. Thomas Jefferson. Lyra without hesitation answered A. George Washington. The studio offered polite applause, but it was drowned by cruel snickers, a guest judge muttering into the mic, "Well, she's not illiterate after all. Color me surprised." The audience's laughter swelled, their smartphones flashing as they recorded their jeers, a storm that humiliated Lyra further. A corporate mogul in the front row smirked, his gold cufflinks glinting as he whispered to his neighbor, fueling the mockery. Lyra's hands remained steady on her sketchbook, her face impassive, her silence a coiled spring, the audience's fury peaking at the brazen public dismissal that mocked her intellect and presence. The hot seat meant to test knowledge became a stage for her degradation, each snicker a calculated strike to crush her spirit, the judge's smugness a relentless assault on her dignity broadcast to millions. The second question, worth $200, was delivered with a smirk. Which country is known as the land of the rising sun? A. China, B. Japan, C. Korea, D. Thailand. Lyra answered B. Japan, her voice steady, her eyes fixed on the host. The audience cackled louder, an influencer shouting, "Lucky guess, let's see if she survives till question 5. The camera zoomed in on her chipped nails. The hashtags, #GreyhoundGenius and #StreetCornerLyra, trending within minutes, each post a dagger aimed at her heart. Damien's grin twitched, his voice dripping with sarcasm. 2 for 2, huh? Don't get cocky, kid." The guest judges exchanged glances, their pens poised over scorecards, their disdain, a silent endorsement of the cruelty. Lyra clutched her sketchbook tighter, her face a mask of stone, her silence louder than their jeers, the audience's rage boiling over at the relentless public assault that aimed to erase her from the game. The third question, for $300, tested her further. In the periodic table, what is the symbol for gold? A. Au, B. Ag, C. Fe, D. Q. Lyra answered A. Au without a pause, her voice clear and resolute. The host's smirk began to falter, his eyes narrowing as the audience's laughter faded, replaced by a murmur of doubt. Fast. Either she's ridiculously lucky or... Damien muttered, his tone shifting as sweat beaded on his forehead, as the fourth question flashed on the screen, worth $500, asking, which planet is known as the Red Planet? A. Venus, B. Mars, C. Jupiter, D. Mercury. Lyra answered, B. Mars. Her voice clear and unwavering. Her eyes locked on the host with a quiet intensity that began to unsettle the studio. The audience, accustomed to her as a punchline, offered tepid applause, but a ripple of curiosity stirred among them, their earlier jeers softening into murmurs of surprise. The influencers in the front rows, their smartphones still poised, exchanged glances, their #GreyhoundGenius hashtags hesitating as Lyra's swift response hinted at something beyond luck. Damien, his smirk faltering, leaned forward, his voice tinged with unease. 4 in a row. You're making this look too easy. The guest judges shifted in their booths, their pens hovering, their earlier mockery now tempered by a flicker of doubt. The cameras captured Lyra's ink-stained hands steady on her sketchbook, her silence a quiet storm that began to shift the room's energy. The audience's emotions wavered, their rage at the initial cruelty mingling with intrigue, each correct answer a crack in their wall of disdain. By the fifth question, worth $1,000, the studio's atmosphere had shifted, but the mockery persisted. Which city hosted the 2008 Summer Olympics? A. Tokyo, B. Beijing, C. London, D. Paris. Lyra answered B. Beijing, her voice unshaken. Silence stretched through the room, the audience's jeers replaced by an uneasy hush. Damien chuckled awkwardly. Well, she made it to question 5. Color us shocked. A guest judge leaned into the mic. Let's see if she can keep up with the big leagues. The cameras zoomed in on Lyra's faded hoodie, the hashtags Lucky Lyra trending, but the crowd's earlier laughter lingered, their scorn a palpable force. Lyra's face remained impassive, her sketchbook a silent anchor, the audience's rage peaking at the reluctant public acknowledgement that still dripped with condescension. The sixth question, for $2,000, pushed the stakes higher. Who wrote the novel Pride and Prejudice? A. Jane Austen, B. Emily Bronte, C. Charles Dickens, D. Virginia Woolf. Lyra answered, A. Jane Austen, her voice steady, her eyes unyielding. The studio froze, the host's sweat now visible, his voice faltering. You do know you have lifelines, right? He stammered, his earlier mockery a fading echo. For the seventh question, worth $4,000, the screen displayed. Which ancient wonder was located in Alexandria? Egypt. A. Hanging Gardens, B. Lighthouse of Alexandria, C. Colossus of Rhodes, D. Temple of Artemis. Lyra answered, B. Lighthouse of Alexandria, her voice steady, her gaze unyielding, as if the question were a mere formality. The audience, their earlier cackles now subdued, leaned forward, their murmurs of skepticism giving way to whispers of astonishment. The tech entrepreneurs in the VIP section, their digital tokens stilled, exchanged nervous glances, their hashtag Lucky Lyra hashtags faltering as Lyra's unbroken streak defied their scorn. Damien's sweat glistened under the lights, his voice cracking. 7 for 7. You're starting to scare me, kid. The guest judges, their scorecards untouched, began to scribble notes, their earlier condescension replaced by a grudging respect. The eighth question, worth $8,000, challenged. Which composer wrote the opera Carmen? A. Giuseppe Verdi, B. Georges Bizet, C. Richard Wagner, D. Giacomo Puccini. Lyra answered, B. Georges Bizet, her voice a quiet blade, her eyes piercing the host with a certainty that sent a shiver through the studio. The audience, their earlier jeers, now a distant echo, sat transfixed, their smartphones lowering as they began to sense something extraordinary unfolding. The quiz show veterans in the front rows, their scorecards forgotten, whispered among themselves, their hashtag Street Corner Lyra hashtags replaced by tentative hashtag Lyra Rising posts. Damien, his earlier swagger crumbling, forced a laugh, 8 in a row. You're making us look bad, Lyra. The guest judges, their earlier smirks gone, leaned forward, their eyes narrowing as Lyra's brilliance began to dawn. By the 10th question, worth $32,000, the studio was a crucible of tension. Who calculated the circumference of the Earth by measuring the angle of the sun's shadow around 240 BC? A. Archimedes, B. Hipparchus, C. Eratosthenes, D. Aristotle. Lyra, still as stone, answered C. Eratosthenes. For the 11th question, worth $64,000, the screen posed. Which physicist developed the theory of general relativity? A. Niels Bohr, B. Albert Einstein, C. Werner Heisenberg, D. Max Planck. Lyra answered, B. Albert Einstein, her voice unwavering, her gaze a silent challenge that stilled the studio's hum. The audience, their earlier skepticism now a faint memory, leaned forward, their whispers of astonishment swelling into gasps of admiration, their smartphones capturing the moment rather than mocking it. The corporate moguls in the front row, their cufflinks dull, sat in stunned silence, their hashtag Lucky Lyra hashtags replaced by hashtag Lyra Genius trends. Damien, his face pale, stammered, 11 correct. You're rewriting the game, Lyra. The guest judges, their earlier disdain erased, began to applaud softly, their eyes fixed on Lyra's unassuming frame, now a beacon of intellect. The 13th question, worth $250,000, demanded, which ancient civilization built the city of Machu Picchu? A. Aztec. B. Maya. C. Inca. D. Olmec. Lyra answered. C. Inca, her voice a steady beacon, her eyes unyielding as the studio's silence grew reverent, the audience now hanging on her every word. The influencers, their earlier jeers, a fading echo, sat transfixed, their smartphones lowered their Lyra rising hashtags trending as they began to chant her name softly. Damien, his earlier mockery, a distant memory wiped his brow, his voice trembling. 13 in a row. You're a phenomenon, Lyra. The guest judges, their scorecards abandoned, rose to their feet, their applause a testament to Lyra's brilliance, their earlier scorn now a damning relic. The million-dollar question loomed, a $1,000 challenge that silenced the studio. Which enzyme, first discovered during molecular research on RNA breakdown in Thermus aquaticus, later became essential to PCR technology? A. DNA ligase. B. Taq polymerase. C. Reverse transcriptase. D. DNA helicase. Lyra, her voice like steel, answered B. Taq polymerase. Published 1976 by Dr. Chien et al. The studio held its breath, the host's face draining of color as the correct answer flashed on the screens. As the golden confetti of victory rained down, Lyra stood poised in the hot seat, her ink-stained hands a testament to her superhuman memory, the studio now a hallowed arena where her brilliance reigned supreme. A distinguished neuroscientist invited as a guest commentator rose from the sidelines, her voice a resonant proclamation that echoed through the electrified auditorium, silencing the last whispers of doubt. Lyra Moore, your eidetic memory is a beacon of human potential, a mind so extraordinary it challenges the boundaries of cognitive science. She declared, her words a thunderbolt that obliterated the remnants of the audience's earlier scorn. The cameras swept across Lyra's faded hoodie, now a mantle of intellectual majesty, her flawless answers a defiant rebuke to the jeers that had sought to bury her. The audience's satisfaction surged, their initial rage at the host's cruelty transformed into awe at the scientist's reverence, each syllable a lash against the antagonist's pride. The tech entrepreneurs, their digital tokens now worthless, stood frozen, their blockchain bravado reduced to ash as social media erupted with #Lyra the genius, drowning their #Greyhound genius taunts. The press, their pens a blur, framed Lyra as the silent genius, her intellect a lighthouse piercing the fog of their prejudice, the air thick with the weight of her triumph and their disgrace. The corporate moguls who'd scoffed at her sat in stunned silence, their cufflinks dull, their influence erased by her unyielding mind. The studio's digital screens, once mocking her with trivial questions, now broadcast her serene visage, each answer a monument to her enduring dignity. The neuroscientists' pledge to feature Lyra's case in global symposiums sealed the moment, a testament to her legacy that left the antagonists trembling in their irrelevance, the audience's hearts pounding with pride at her ascent. With the audience's applause shaking the rafters, a celebrated quizmaster revered for his decades hosting international trivia championships stepped onto the stage, his presence a storm that commanded silence, his voice a solemn vow that reverberated through the studio. Lyra Moore, your perfect run is not merely a victory, it is a historic redefinition of intellectual mastery, he declared, his eyes fixed on Lyra's sketchbook, now a sacred relic of her genius. We will establish an annual trivia award in your name to honor unsung minds. The cameras captured Lyra's unyielding gaze, her torn jeans a badge of her triumph, her answers a relentless assault on the mockery that had sought to diminish her. The audience's satisfaction soared, their fury at the initial jeers transformed into awe at the quizmaster's unprecedented tribute, each word a guillotine slicing through the antagonist's arrogance. The quiz show veterans who'd brandished their trophies stood trembling, their accolades now tarnished, their street corner Lyra hashtags obliterated by #Lyra, the genius trends that swept social media. The press, their reports blazing across global outlets, framed Lyra as the silent genius, her mind a supernova that outshone their cruelty, the air thick with the weight of her triumph and their disgrace. The influencers who'd chanted next, sat in stunned silence, their social media empires crumbling, their clout erased by Lyra's brilliance. The studio's lights, once a backdrop for scorn, now illuminated her triumph, each cheer a testament to her enduring dignity. The quizmaster's pledge to feature Lyra's story in his memoirs sealed the antagonist's fate, their legacy reduced to a cautionary tale, the audience's hearts swelling with pride at her coronation. A producer stepped onto the stage, his voice trembling as he addressed the crowd, the cameras rolling. "Ladies and gentlemen, Lyra Moore holds the Guinness World Record for eidetic memory, the ability to retain everything she reads forever. She's declined every international competition for the last 5 years. Today, she came here simply to prove a point. The woman you mocked, the woman you sneered at, might just be the smartest human in America." The second judge, a trivia historian whose books had shaped quiz culture, stepped forward, her voice a solemn vow that echoed through the auditorium, her earlier skepticism now a damning relic. "Lyra Moore, your perfect run has not only won this game, but has redefined the limits of human memory." She declared, her eyes fixed on Lyra's battered sneakers, now emblems of triumph. "We dedicate this season to your unparalleled mind." The cameras zoomed in on Lyra's serene gaze, her sketchbook a symbol of her unyielding intellect, her performance a monument to her resilience. The audience's satisfaction soared, their fury at the host's mockery eclipsed by the judge's historic tribute, each word a nail in the coffin of the antagonist's arrogance. The quiz show veterans who'd tossed scorecards stood silent, their trophies now relics of their failure, their hashtag street corner, Lyra hashtags replaced by Lyra Genius Trends. Lyra rose from her chair, adjusted her faded hoodie, her expression cold as glass. "I don't need your money," she said, her eyes locking on Damien's trembling frame. "I just need you to learn silence, and to never judge anyone by how they look." As a prominent philanthropist whose foundation had funded countless educational initiatives rose from the audience, her voice a resonant decree that silenced the last echoes of mockery, her presence a beacon of moral authority. "Lyra Moore, your mind is a gift to humanity, a testament to the power of the overlooked." She declared, her eyes locked on Lyra's canvas sneakers, now emblems of intellectual sovereignty. "My foundation will launch a global scholarship program in your name to empower minds like yours." The cameras swept across Lyra's serene expression, her faded hoodie a mantle of genius, her flawless run a defiant rebuke to the jeers that had sought to erase her. The audience's satisfaction surged, their rage at the initial cruelty transformed into reverence at the philanthropist's pledge, each word a lash against the antagonist's pride. The corporate moguls who'd whispered scorn stood trembling, their gold cufflinks now relics of their failure, their lucky Lyra hashtags buried under Lyra, the genius trends that dominated global feeds. The press, their headlines blazing, framed Lyra as the silent genius, her intellect a radiant force that outshone their betrayal, the air thick with the weight of her triumph and their disgrace. The tech entrepreneurs who'd mocked her sat in stunned silence, their blockchain bravado extinguished their influence, erased by Lyra's brilliance. The philanthropist's commitment to name Lyra as an ambassador for her foundation sealed the antagonist's humiliation, their legacy reduced to a footnote, the audience's hearts pounding with pride at her ascent. Damien Holt, his earlier sarcasm now a damning relic, addressed the audience, his voice trembling with reverence as he faced Lyra now, a beacon of intellectual majesty under the studio lights. "Lyra Moore, your flawless run has not only won Millionaire, but has humbled us all," he declared, his eyes fixed on her sketchbook now a symbol of triumph. "We invite you to guest host our season finale to honor your genius." The cameras zoomed in on Lyra's serene expression, her faded hoodie a mantle of intellectual sovereignty, her performance a defiant rebuke to the jeers that sought to break her. The audience's satisfaction soared, their fury at Damien's mockery, eclipsed by his public capitulation, each word a nail in the coffin of the antagonist's pride. The influencers who'd chanted next stood silent, their smartphones abandoned, their hashtag Greyhound Genius hashtags replaced by hashtag Lyra Genius Trends. She announced her winnings would fund scholarships for underprivileged children, then walked off stage. The nation's tearful gaze following her, her clip going viral within hours. As the third judge, a cognitive scientist whose research had defined memory studies, rose his voice a resonant decree that froze the studio. his eyes locking on Lyra's ink-stained hands, now revered as conduits of intellectual divinity. Lyra Moore. Your eidetic memory is a marvel that will inspire science for decades. He declared his words a thunderclap that shattered the last vestiges of the mogul's scorn. We will fund a research grant in your name to study cognitive excellence. The cameras captured Lyra's quiet nod, her torn jeans a badge of her victory, her performance a legend that would outlive the stage. The audience's satisfaction soared their rage at the cruelty transformed into pride, at the judge's historic pledge, each word a blow to the antagonist's legacy. The corporate moguls who'd sneered stood trembling, their cufflinks dull, their #LuckyLyra hashtags buried under Lyra's brilliance. With the studio still reeling, a legendary game show creator whose formats had shaped global television stepped onto the stage. His voice, a resonant proclamation that silenced the auditorium. His presence, a storm that swept away the last vestiges of the audience's scorn. Lyra Moore, your eidetic memory has not only conquered Millionaire, but has rewritten the art of the quiz show. He declared, his eyes fixed on Lyra's sketchbook, now a sacred artifact of her triumph. We will create a new international competition in your name to celebrate intellectual excellence. The cameras captured Lyra's unyielding gaze, her torn jeans a badge of her victory, her answers a relentless assault on the mockery that had sought to diminish her. The audience's satisfaction soared, their fury at the initial jeers transformed into awe at the creator's historic pledge, each word a guillotine slicing through the antagonist's arrogance. The quiz show veterans who'd jeered stood trembling, their trophies now tarnished, their street corner Lyra hashtags obliterated by #Lyra genius trends that swept social media. The press, their reports blazing across global outlets, framed Lyra as the silent genius, her mind a supernova that outshone their cruelty, the air thick with the weight of her triumph and their disgrace. The influencers who'd chanted next sat in stunned silence, their social media empires crumbling, their clout erased by Lyra's brilliance. The creator's vow to feature Lyra's story in a documentary sealed the antagonist's fate, their legacy reduced to a cautionary tale, the audience's heart swelling with pride at her coronation. Outside the studio, as Lyra exited under a cascade of applause, a crowd of fans, scholars and media gathered under Las Vegas's neon glow, their eyes wide with awe, their chants of silent genius echoing through the night. The head judge followed her, his voice a resonant proclamation that silenced the city's hum, his words a final blow to the antagonist's pride. Lyra Moore, your mind has not only conquered this game, but has inspired a global movement to honor the overlooked, he declared, his eyes fixed on her canvas sneakers, now emblems of triumph. Your legacy will headline our next season. The cameras captured Lyra's serene smile, her sketchbook a symbol of her victory, her performance a legend that would outlive the theater. In the aftermath of Lyra's exit, as the studio's applause lingered like a sacred hymn, a revered librarian whose curation of global archives had shaped academic discourse emerged from the audience, her voice a resonant decree that pierced the Las Vegas night, silencing the city's hum. Lyra Moore, your mind is a living library, a testament to the power of knowledge over prejudice, she declared, her eyes fixed on Lyra's canvas sneakers, now emblems of intellectual triumph. The Library of Congress will dedicate a permanent exhibit to your eidetic memory, honoring your legacy for generations. The cameras followed Lyra's serene silhouette, her sketchbook a symbol of her victory, her flawless run a legend that would outlive the theater. The audience's satisfaction surged, their rage at the initial cruelty transformed into reverence at the librarian's historic pledge, each word a lash against the antagonist's pride. The corporate moguls and tech entrepreneurs, their #LuckyLyra hashtags now buried, stood trembling in the shadows, their influence erased by Lyra's brilliance. The press, their headlines blazing across global platforms, framed Lyra as the silent genius, her intellect, a radiant force that outshone their betrayal, the air thick with the weight of her triumph and their disgrace. The influencers who'd mocked her sat in stunned silence, their social media accounts suspended their clout, extinguished by Lyra's brilliance. The librarian's commitment to archive Lyra's story as a national treasure sealed the antagonist's humiliation, their legacy reduced to a footnote, the audience's hearts pounding with pride at her ascent. Lyra's triumph was seismic, her mind a legend that reverberated beyond the studio, reshaping the narrative of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. The press uncovered her past a prodigy who'd memorized entire libraries but lived modestly to support her struggling family, her intellect hidden in the shadows of hardship. They called her the silent genius, her torn jeans and canvas sneakers now symbols of untouchable authority. Other quiz shows sent her invitations begging for appearances, but she declined, her silence as powerful as her answers. The audience who jeered her were left to grapple with their shame, their status erased their clout, a fading echo. Lyra's victory wasn't just a check, it was a lesson etched into the show's history, a reminder that the simplest woman could wield the deadliest mind, the audience's hearts pounding with pride. Millionaire's culture of elitism crumbled. New producers demanded humility, their respect for Lyra absolute, their eyes on the stage where she'd redefined power. The studio's lights, once a backdrop for privilege, now reflected its failure, the memory of Lyra's flawless run a shadow over every episode. Damien faced a social media storm, his apologies trending alongside Lyra's triumph, his credibility a relic of his downfall. The blacklisted influencers were shunned, their accounts suspended, their status erased. Lyra's legacy grew, her scholarships a beacon for every underdog who'd been laughed off a stage, the audience cheering her triumph as a testament to true strength. In the weeks that followed, Lyra's name became a mantra in quiz halls worldwide, her story a cautionary tale for every smug critic. The audience who'd chanted for her failure were ostracized, their reputations tarnished, their influence meaningless against her reach. The show's ratings soared, its sponsors clamoring to align with Lyra's legacy, its format retooled to honor intellect over spectacle. Lyra was spotted at a charity event. Her faded hoodie understated her presence, a quiet storm that commanded every room. She didn't need their lights, their questions, or their approval. She'd come to answer, and they'd failed, their arrogance crushed in 9 seconds. The silent genius had no need for their world, she'd already conquered it. The audience screaming her name, their satisfaction a roar that echoed beyond the stage. Lyra Moore didn't come for applause, she didn't care for the check, she came to remind them that underdogs bite hardest when you laugh at them. Like, share, comment, and subscribe, because next time, the genius they mock might just be sitting in your living room.